Chapter 3. Suji and Shikako's Hotel for Pets. Relax with your beloved pet while joining on breathtaking view of Mount Fuji. This was the slogan with which Suzuki Suji and his wife Shikako launched their bed and breakfast 3 years ago. The whole thing came about when the company Suji worked for started to struggle and began to explore the idea of voluntary redundancy. Around that time, a B&B next to the fruit orchards owned by Shikako's parents came up for sale at a greatly reduced price, and the couple bought it, lock, stock, and barrel, and opened it up for business. They considered part of its appeal would be to offer a discount to guests wanting to do pick your own in the orchards next door. This worked both ways, for it would benefit the orchard business to have customers referred to them, which was another reason they decided to take the plunge. In the end, though, the V&B's biggest selling point was that they allowed pets. It was Shikako who came up with the idea. Using the first and second floors, plus a small cottage in the grounds, they were able to lodge guests with dogs and cats separately. Dogs and cats each had their own floor, and as long as they got on with their own kind, they could enjoy life off the lead or outside the basket. Issues of compatibility were left to the owner's discretion. Very few B&Bs in the area allowed both dogs and cats. Most places catered just for dogs. Some of the larger inns accepted both, but most of them demanded that pets remain on a lead or in a basket. She was more of a dog person, so at first he wasn't sure about his wife's idea, but after the B&B had been running for 3 years, he had to admit she'd been very perceptive. In addition to Shikako's family business, there were plenty of other orchards and wineries nearby, and within their prefecture, this area attracted a lot of tourists. But a B&B where cats could stay stress-free was almost unheard of. Word of mouth and repeat business led to an increase in cat-owning guests, and these days, guests with cats outnumbered those with dogs. Shikako loved all cats, and cat-owning guests always received a warm welcome. But she'd never been happier than with the guests who were arriving today. Shikako had been on the second floor making the bed in the sunniest twin room, and now, dirty linen in hand and humming a tune, she made her way downstairs. "You seem pretty upbeat," Soji said. He tried to make it sound casual, but it came out sounding oddly churlish. Shikako looked at him, puzzled. "Aren't you happy? Satoru Miyawaki is bringing his cat for the very first time." "Of course I am, but," Soji said hurriedly, trying to gloss it over, "I was just wondering if this cat will get on with our pets." Their own pets were a dog, and Kaiken breed, and a brown tabby cat. The Kaiken was a 3-year-old male named Toramaru, while the brown tabby cat was a 12-year-old female named Momo. Toramaru, Tora meaning tiger, got his name from the distinctive orangey brindle fur that certain Kaiken dogs have, while Momo, which means peach, was named after the main crop of the orchard. "Don't worry so much, it will be fine. Our little ones are used to having guests," Suji persisted, despite Shikaku's teasing smile. "Satoru is giving away his cat, you know. I'm sure he can't be too happy about that." The man they were expecting was their mutual high school friend Satoru Miyawaki. An email had arrived in Suji's inbox saying that, though Satoru loved his cat very much, there was a compelling reason why he couldn't keep him any longer, and he was looking for someone to take care of him. No explanation of what this compelling reason was, but when Suji noticed on the newspaper that the large corporation had started to lay off employees, he didn't pursue the matter. Satoru's company, as he recalled, was a subsidiary of that corporation. If an organization that big is beginning to lay people off, Suji pondered, then I guess it's only to be expected that my old company would do the same. He was lucky to have left his local firm when he did. "But if we take on his cat, we can give him back at any time, can't we?" Shikaku said, and laughed. "I'm thinking of it more as a temporary arrangement. I'll take good care of him while we have him, of course. That goes without saying." A temporary arrangement? Suji hadn't considered that. Shikaku was always so positive and forward-thinking, always looking on the bright side. Calling Suji prudent made it sound positive, but the fact was he tended to be far less optimistic, the exact opposite of Shikako. There really must be some sound reason for him to give away his cat all of a sudden, but one day I know Satoru will come back for him. Shikaku seemed to believe categorically that Satoru's love for his cat would overcome all obstacles. When it came to cat love, the two of them had always been on the same wavelength. Bed linen in hand, Shikaku went into the laundry room. "Get down, Momo." Their cat seemed to be asleep on top of the washing machine. "Satoru says his cat is named Nana. Make sure you get on with him now." Shikaku sounded like she was singing as she said this. "Oh," she called loudly. "Darling, make sure you tell Tora the same thing." Both dog and cat were equally important to them, but in practical terms, there was a clear division of duties. Shikaku, the cat person, was in charge of Momo, while Soji, more on the dog side of the divide, handled all things Toramaru. Whenever there's anything major happening in our family, we need to inform both our dog and cat. This proposal by Shikaku had become a firm family rule. Soji slipped his feet into the sandals he had left at the entrance and went outside. When the weather was fine, during the day they let Toramaru have free run of a special fenced-off space in the front yard. Soji's father-in-law, who prided himself on his carpentry skills, had built a kennel for Toramaru. Tora, hearing his name, Tora waved his curled tail energetically and leapt up to his owner. He could jump so high, it looked like he might one day bound over the high fence. So, to be on the safe side, whenever guests arrived, they put him on a lead tied to his kennel. The expert who had given them the dog told them how the breed divided into two types: the slimmer types who were built for chasing deer, and the thicker set types who were good at chasing wild boar. Toramaru was a textbook deer type. For 2 days, Satoru would be the only guest, so Soji had left Tora off his sled. "Satoru is coming this evening, the friend I told you about." Soji had acquired Toramaru 3 years earlier when they first opened the B&B, but right about that time, Satoru was moved over to a busy section of his company and had little free time to visit him and Shikaku. Soji had been able to see him occasionally when he went into Tokyo to purchase food for the B&B, but it would be the first time in 3 years that Shikaku had seen him, and the very first time for Toramaru. Satoru had always seemed very busy with work, so Soji presumed his job must be secure, but with the staffing cutbacks, there could be many factors at play. "This is the first time you'll meet Satoru and Nana, Satora, and I hope you'll get on with them." Soji gave Toramaru's head a brisk rub, and the dog gave a throaty growl. Rough stroking like this was one of the real pleasures of having a dog. If he tried the same with Momo, he thought, she'd probably lunge at him, claws bared. "You be on your best behavior, okay?" Toramaru looked searchingly into Soji's eyes, then gave another husky growl. That day, there was no Dope's about to pop out kind of music playing in the silver van. Perhaps thinking he'd have a break from the car stereo, Satoru had the radio on instead. A little while ago, a refined-sounding older gentleman had been enthusiastically introducing a book on some program or other. Apparently, he was an actor. He talked elegantly, yet occasionally he would use unexpected language, words like cool and awesome, and even for a mere cat like myself, hearing this gentleman rattle on and on about how awesome a book was really made me smile. All well and good, but no matter how appealing a book might be, I can't read it. As I explained earlier, most animals are multilingual when it comes to listening, but reading is beyond us. Reading and writing seem to belong to a special linguistic system that only humans possess. If Mr. Kodama, the host of the program, likes the book so much, maybe I should read it, Satoru murmured. When he was at home, he spent more time reading books than watching TV. He'd even been known to shed the occasional tears as he turned the pages. If he ever caught me watching him during one of these moments, he would look embarrassed and say, "Stop staring." The book program came to an end, and after a while, a nursery song began to play. "Put your head above the clouds, look down on all the other mountains around." Sometimes it's nice to hear this kind of gentle singing, though the melody was making me sleepy. "Hear the thunder roll above, Mount Fuji is the highest mountain in all of Japan." At this last line, I sat up, rested my paws on the passenger seat window, and craned my neck to see out. For a while now, there had been a huge triangular mountain plunged down in the distance. "Oh, did you make the connection, Nana?" Humans always underestimate our language skills. Just 'cause they can read and write, there's no need to act all high and mighty. That's right, it's a song about Mount Fuji. Great timing, don't you think? When that triangular-shaped mountain, with its base spread so wide, loomed closer, Satoru said, "That's Mount Fuji." On TV and in photos, it looks like a triangle that has flopped down onto the earth. But when you see it in real life, it feels overwhelming, like it's closing in on you. It's the highest mountain in Japan at 3,776 meters, and there's even a mnemonic device for people to remember the elevation. Let's all be like Fuji-san, Fuji-san, no yoni mi 3, na 7, ni na 7, row 6. There are many higher mountains around the world, but as a freestanding single mountain, it's unusually high. Satoru rattled on and on, explaining all kind of facts in great detail. I get it, how great it is. You don't need to go on and on. It makes total sense why there is a song dedicated to it. Yada yada. You really have to see it with your own eyes though. If you've only seen it on TV or in photos, it will always remain just a triangular mountain sitting there, like it was to me until right this moment. Being big has its advantages, just as being a big cat makes it easier to get by in life. Still, this mountain was pretty darn amazing. I wonder how many cats in Japan have seen the actual Mount Fuji. Unless they live around here, there can't be too many. Our silver van was like a magic carriage. Every time I got into it, it carried me to a place I'd never been before. At that moment, we were without doubt the greatest travelers in the world, and I was the world's greatest traveling cat. The van veered off the main road and drove into a thick, lush forest. The branches of the trees on either side had bunches of white paperbacks hanging from them, apparently to protect the peaches growing on them, to keep the insects off and hold the fruit ripen. After zigzagging for quite some time, finally a large white house appeared in front of us. "We're here, Nana. This must be the bed and breakfast Satoru had talked about. The inn, run by some friends that accepts pets. Today, the place was reserved just for us." As the van pulled into a parking lot big enough for about 10 cars, a man Satoru's age came out to greet us. "Suji!" Satoru gave him a wave and unloaded his bag from the van. "Is this your only bag? I'll help you." "Apart from Nana, I only brought a change of clothes, as it's just the one night." Suji took hold of his friend's bag, and Satoru carried me in my basket, and together they climbed the gentle slope to the B&B entrance. "What a wonderful place this is. Is that a dog run?" On the way up the slope was a fairly large fenced-in space with what looked like a kennel near the back. "I wanted a space where my dog could run free." "A Kai can, isn't it? I remember you saying you had one." From inside the basket, I sniffed at the air, a disgusting smell that belonged to that perennial rival to cats. I squinted through the bars and watched as a hard-faced brindle dog sprang to his feet and stared challengingly in my direction. "Yeah, his name is Toramaru. Is he okay living with a cat?" "Of course. We have Momo, you know, and lots of guests bring their cats." "Ah, that's right. I'd already heard from Satoru that they had a middle-aged female cat named Momo. She was twice my age," he'd said. I was still fairly young, so would we get on? "Hey there. Hello. Glad to meet you, Toramaru," called Satoru, holding his hand over the fence. "Hold on a minute. Don't go speaking to that dog." I glowered from inside my basket. This Kaiken, who went by the name of Toramaru, cast a sharp glance our way and growled and bared his yellow teeth. "Is he in a bad mood, then?" The instant Satoru inclined his head. "Ruff!" the dog barked at him. "Whoa!" As you might expect, Satoru quickly pulled his hand back from the fence. "Hey, knock it off, hound." Every single hair on my body was now standing on end. If you're going to pick a fight with Satoru, then I, a cat with a strong sense of pride, I'm not going to just sit here and take it. If you don't want that nose of yours cut to shreds, then apologize right this instant, you mangy mutt. "Tora!" Suji scolded him, but the mutt didn't stop his miserable yammering. Satoru tried to soothe me. "It's okay, Nana, just hang in there." He was holding the door of the basket closed from the outside because he knew I was quite willing to have it out with that stupid dog if I had to. "I'm really sorry," Suji said. "He's not usually like this." "No, It's okay. I wonder if we did something to upset him. What's going on? A woman hurried out of the front door, a pretty woman wearing an apron. Is Tora angry? It's no big deal. Hi, Shikaku. How are you? This from Satoru, who waved his hand at the woman. Satoru, I'm so sorry. Is everything alright? No worries. I'm not used to cats or dogs getting angry with me, and it startled me for a second. That's true. From an animal's point of view, Satoru was a pretty stress-free human, the kind that buzzing dogs and cats found no reason to pick a fight with. An impudent dog like this leaping out at him was definitely at first. I'm so sorry, I really am, so he apologized, making another knock-it-off gesture at the dog. Toramaru let his curled tail droop. Serves you right, you stupid hound. It's fine, really, Satoru said, trying to smooth things over. He seems like a good, dependable dog. Maybe I look a little dodgy to him? Satoru tried again, reaching over the fence to scratch the dog's neck. The mud quietly allowed him to stroke him, but it was obvious to me he was still sulking. Try flashing those nursers at Satoru again for even a split second, mate, and you'll have me to deal with. Through the bars, the dog and I exchanged some seething, hostile looks, but Satoru was then shown inside the house, so there was an unavoidable pause in the action. We were shown a lovely sunroom on the second floor. After you get settled, calm down, Shikaku's son said. She turned and went nimbly down the stairs. Well, I'll take a look around the room then. I unlatched the door of the basket from the inside and slipped silently. The neat little room had wooden flooring, and from a feline point of view looked perfectly cozy. Oh, hello there, Momo. At the sound of Satoru's voice, spun around to face the doorway. A small, dignified brown female tabby was sitting quietly in the corner. Double my age, but still quite limber from the look of things. Nice to make your acquaintance, Momo, greeted me, in a dignified voice quite in keeping with a dignified tabby. I hear you and Toramaru have already squabbled. I let out a sniff. That dog has no manners, but instead of humans who try to say hello to him, he couldn't have been well brought up. I was thoroughly sarcastic in my comments, and Momo smiled wryly. Please, forgive him. Just as your master is precious to you, so Toramaru's master is precious to him. Your master is precious to you, so you bark at your master's friend? That doesn't compute at all. As if sensing my displeasure, Momo gave another wry smile. I'm really sorry. I believe our master is not quite as strong as a character as your master. I still didn't get it. I refrained from objecting, though, because I didn't want to be disrespectful to an older lady. He seems to be getting on well with Momo. Satoru had come down to the lobby, came lunch, and with a smile he was pointing upstairs. They're in the bedroom, getting to know each other better. Now, if only Toramaru could be friendlier, maybe he's angry that I brought a cat along. He should be used to guests bringing cats by now. Shikaku tilted her head, puzzled, and offered them some herbal tea. Darling, you did explain things to Toramaru, didn't you? Shikaku scolded Tsuji jokingly. Of course I did, Soji spotted, his tone a little snappy. You be on your best behavior, okay? Tsuji had said, as Toramaru gazed into his eyes. So why did he then bark at Satoru? Maybe Toramaru had detected some discomfort in Tsuji. Whoa, this is delicious, Satoru said as he snipped his tea, and Shikaku beamed. I'm so happy. Our guests seem to like it too. The herbs are from our garden. Shikaku looked over at Tsuji eternally. The first time I made herbal tea for him, he said it was like drinking toothpaste. One silly slip of the tongue back when they had first got married, and Shikaku still bore a grudge. Thinking about this, Tsuji had often wished he could follow Satoru's lead and be shrewder and dealing with things. But in truth, Tsuji found openly praising anyone a bit embarrassing. It's slightly sweet. What do you put in it? Satoru asked. Stevia? Ah, that makes sense. This is why I enjoy talking to you, Satoru, because we can talk about things like this. Your business seems to be doing well, Satoru said, clearing his throat. It is. Targeting us with cats was a smart move, Soji said. All my idea, Shikaku returned. Indeed, entirely the wife's doing, Soji added. But what about you? Are you doing okay? Giving away your cat all of a sudden? Soji had found it hard to ask this question in an email, so he had planned to do it when they were face to face. Yeah, well, you know, Satoru gave a troubled smile, and when he did, he suddenly looked very old. I hear the business group your company belongs to has started to lay people off. It's not really that. There are other things involved. Shikaku gave Soya a stealthy wink to signal him to stop. Okay, he signaled back. I was so relieved when you said you'd take Nana for me. I've asked quite a few people now and taken Nana to see them, but somehow it just hasn't worked out. There's one thing I'd like to say up front, Satoru, Shikako said, sitting up straight. We're thinking of it as temporary. We'll take good care of Nana, of course, but if things work out for you so you can take him again, we'll have no problem if you come back for him, anytime. Satoru looked as though this had really struck a chord, and for a moment he pursed his lips and looked at his feet. That face, lips pursed, trying his best to keep his feelings in check, was one both Shikako and Soji had seen before. Suddenly Satoru looked up and smiled. Thank you. I'm sorry to be so selfish, but it really makes me happy to hear that. Satoru had become a mutual friend, but Soji had been the first one to form a bond with him. In the spring of their first year in high school, the three of them were all in the same class. In their new form room, students from their previous junior high tended to group together, weighing up the situation, wondering who to make friends with. Satoru wasn't hanging out with anyone. There didn't seem to be anyone else from the school he had just come from. They learned later that he'd arrived from another prefecture during the spring holidays and had taken the transfer exam, which was why he didn't know Azul. It was during one of the periodic exams that they became friends. Suji had crammed all night for the exam, and his head was stuffed with mathematical equations and English vocabulary. He was on his bike, heading to school, pedaling as gentle as he could, in case some unexpected jolt or vibration drove all the facts he'd memorized from his brain. Along the road to school, he spied a face he knew. That looks like Satoru from my class, he thought, as he drew closer. Satoru had got off his bike and was standing beside a wide ditch. The ditch was the width of a stream, an agricultural irrigation channel lined with concrete on both sides, about as deep as a child was tall. Satoru was staring down at it, a serious look on his face. So you wondered what he was up to, but didn't have much time to spare before school started. Their eyes had met, so he thought he'd just give him a nod and pass on by, but he began to feel that would make things awkward later. So after he'd gone on a little bit, he stopped. What are you doing? Soji asked. Satoru looked over at him, as if surprised. He must have thought Soji would just cycle by. I found something a little troubling, that's all. Satoru pointed down at the ditch, where Soji could now see a small dog shivering. The dog had managed to scramble on top of a tiny sandbar where gravel and dirt had piled up, and his thick white and brown fur was soaked and plastered to him. It's a Shinsu. Soji knew the breed, because Shikaku's family had one. They ran a fruit orchard, loved animals, and ever since he was a young child they had several dogs and cats, which was something that drew customers in. And Soji had always imbibed their attitude to animals. Soji's family lived in company housing. His father was a middle management company employee, and because of his mother's allergies, the only pets she would allow were hairless ones such as goldfish or turtles. His dream had always been to have a dog, but this was never going to happen in his own house, so being with Shikaku's family at least came close. He must have fallen in. I guess so, Satoru said, nodding. There were no steps down to the ditch that they could see. He's not the type of dog you'd expect to be a stray, so I reckon he must have wandered away from his home and got lost. At Shikaku's, during the day, they let their dogs run free in the orchard so the customers who came to pick fruit could enjoy their company. But at night, they always made sure they were brought inside the house. Go on ahead, you don't need to stick around, Satoru urged him. But for Suji it was a delicate decision. If it emerged later that he'd ignored the poor little dog that had fallen into a ditch, then Shikaku would be pretty upset. Yeah, but I'm worried about him. Glancing at his watch, Suji got off his bike. He was going to be late for school, but if he got there before first period, he'd still be able to take the exam. Let's sort this out as quickly as we can. Satoru smiled. You're a good guy, Suji. All he'd been worried about was Shikaku's reaction, and he found his praise from Satoru embarrassing. If we go down there, our ankles will get soaked. The sandbar where the Shisu was standing was too far away to leap to from either side of the ditch. The water was full of algae and grass, so they couldn't see the bottom, and they were reluctant to take their shoes off in case there were any pieces of glass. Suji noticed a pile of boards left on the side of the road, the remnants, perhaps, of some scaffolding. He ran over and pulled one out. If we angle it down near the dock, he might be able to use it as a bridge and climb along it. Maybe, but even with the board right in front of it, the Shisu didn't react. They tried calling, but the dog just stood there trembling, not taking a single step. Maybe it can see it, Satoru said, a serious look on his face. If you look at him closely from the side, his eyes are a bit cloudy, he might be getting cataracts. It was hard to tell the age of the baby-faced dog, but its coat was definitely a bit worn. Amazing that the little guy made it this far. There was a busy motorway nearby. It was a miracle the dog hadn't been run over. Perhaps it had fallen into the ditch because it couldn't see properly. I'm going to go down. If I use this, I won't get wet. Satoru put a foot on the board that stretched out towards the dog. Be careful, it's dangerous. The board was old and withered. It might not even hold a dog's weight, let alone that of a high school boy. Just as these thoughts were going through Suji's head, the board let out an ominous creak. Oh! Satoru swayed on the board, and in an instant it had split completely in two and collapsed into the ditch. There was a loud splash, and a spray of water as Satoru landed on his rear in the ankle-deep stream. Woof! 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 The Shisu barked, and started to splash his way blindly through the water. Wait! Satoru scrambled to his feet and tried to follow him, but his splashing only scared the Shisu even more, and he didn't stop. You wouldn't know he was old and half-blind, the way the dog tore through the water. I'll run ahead and climb down. We'll catch him. Don't let him get away. So he hurried down the road, past the fleeing Shisu, and took the flying leap into the ditch. There was an explosion of water. The Shisu leapt into the air and screeched to a halt. Then he spun around and started to race back the way he had come. He's coming back your way. Grab him. Satoru leapt towards the dog like a goalie. The Shisu made a tight turn, trying to slip past, but Satoru managed to snag a hind leg. Panic, the dog chomped down on his hand. Ow! Hang on! Don't let go! Suji wiped off his blazer, threw it over the Shisu, and grabbed him. Swaddled, the dog finally gave up his struggle. You okay? Suji asked. Satoru smiled rarely. This could be pretty serious, he said, showing his hand. Spots of blood were bubbling up. For such a little creature, the dog certainly knew how to bite. You'd better get to the hospital. No chance I'll make that exam now, Suji thought. They took the dog to a police station beside the motorway, but when they went to the hospital, there was a problem. Satoru didn't have an insurance card. Being high school students, they didn't have enough cash either, so they ended up handing over their school ID cards and promising to come back and pay. And finally Satoru was treated. By the time they got to school, second period was just finishing. They went to the faculty office and explained to their form teacher what had happened. The whole thing sounded like a joke, but Satoru's resemblance to a drowned rat and his bandaged hand must have convinced her, for the teacher accepted their version of events. What happened to you, guys? Asked Hikaku, playing the concerned older sister as the boys returned to the classroom. When she heard about the rescued Shisu, she wanted to see him, so they stopped at the police station on their way home from school. Satoru was concerned about the dog too, so the three of them went together. The old Shisu, with his cloudy eyes, was on a lead in the corner of the lobby, bowls of dry dog biscuits and water next to it. No one had reported a missing dog. He really is quite old. I don't think he can see well at all. Shikaku knelt down in front of the dog and waved her hand in front of his eyes. The Shisu was slow to react. I was wondering if we could ask you to take him, said a middle-aged police officer. Looking after lost dogs isn't really a policeman's job, so we can't keep him here for very long. If you can keep him here, then what will happen to him? Satoru asked. The officer tilted his head. If the owner doesn't appear in the next few days, he'll go to the pound. How could you? Shikaku snapped. You know they'll put him down if the owner doesn't turn up in time. Satoru, pale and silent, nudged Shoji in the ribs. How about keeping it at your place? He suggested. Instead of arguing with the officer, Satoru seemed to be looking for a practical solution. No can do. My mom is allergic to any animal with fur. What about yours, Satoru? We're in company housing, and they don't allow pets. Shikaku, who was still gurping at the police officer, turned around. It's okay, she said. We'll keep him at ours. Are you sure you can make that decision right now? Shouldn't you ask your parents or something? Satoru seemed alarmed by her snap decision, but Shikaku just glared at him in irritation. Well, we can just leave him here. Shikaku called home from the payphone in the lobby. Almost an hour later, her father pulled up to the station in his small truck. They loaded her bike on the truck bed, and Shikaku got into the passenger seat and held the Shih Tzu on her lap. Okay, see you soon, she called. Satoru, if you're worried about him, you can come and visit him at my place. Ah, thanks. Satoru seemed a bit intimidated by Shikaku's forceful manner. Then Shikaku was gone, like a storm departing, and the boys burst out laughing. That Sakita is really something. She sure is. She's always had strong views when it comes to animals, ever since she was little. Have you known her since she was a kid? Satoru wanted to know. We're childhood friends, Suji explained. I get it, Satoru said, nodding. So that's why Sakita calls you Susan? I told her to drop that. What's wrong with it? She's your cute, dependable childhood friend. The way he'd casually called her cute startled Suji. Shikaku was spirited, kind, and, yes, cute. He'd always known that. Still, Suji had never spoken about these things out loud. It made him feel like he'd lost out. But will her family really be okay about taking in an unknown dog without any warning? Satoru asked. It will be fine. Her family are mad about animals. They have 5 or 6 dogs and cats already. Really? Cats too? Shikaku's more of a cat person. I see, Satoru said, smiling. I love cats too. I wouldn't mind making sure the Shih Tzu is okay, but it would be nice to see her cats too. Suji was hit by another wave of anxiety. It was clear Satoru and Shikaku were going to get on well. That evening, Shikaku phoned Suji. The fact that he had missed taking the exam in order to rescue the dog had made an impression on her. By the way, she asked, which one of you found it? Suji wished he'd been the one who'd come across the dog. The thought of saying this had crossed his mind. But if I had, I probably would have just let him be. Perhaps the most I would have done would have been to check on him and on the way home. Well, we were both passing at about the same time. A little white lie. But I think Satoru actually spotted him first, he added hastily. We haven't spoken much till now, but Satoru's a pretty good guy. Shikaku seemed to like Satoru a lot. He had known she would. The three of them often talked together after this, and Satoru and Suji often went to Shikaku's house to see how the Shih Tzu was settling in. Whenever Suji went to see Shikaku, he'd be put to work helping out in the orchards, as would Satoru. From the way he spoke, Satoru seemed like a real city boy, but he was, surprisingly, used to farm work, and Shikaku's family quickly grew fond on him. The stray Shih Tzu's owner never did materialize, so the Sakita family ended up keeping him permanently. Satoru felt badly about it and said he'd try to find somebody to take the dog, but Shikaku waved this away. The younger Shih Tzu they already had got on with the new one. They were like parent and child, and typically for Shikaku, she referred to the latter as the Shih Tzu Miyawaki gave us. The cats at the Sakitas were friendlier to Satoru than to Suji. They had, from the start, sensed that Suji was more of a dog person. Things evened down, though, since the dogs were much friendlier to him than to Satoru. The Shih Tzu Miyawaki gave us, perhaps remembering how Satoru had been the one to chase him down, was friendlier to Suji than to Satoru, who had found him. One day at school, Satoru was leafing through the part-time jobs listings in the newspaper. The end of term exams were approaching, and their teachers had joked with them not to pick up any more stray dogs. Are you looking for a holiday job? Suji asked. Yeah, I was wondering if there's any with a decent hourly rate. How come? Isn't your allowance enough? No, it's just that I want to take a trip during the summer holiday, and I'd like to go as soon as possible. Where to? Kokura. Suji didn't know the place. It's in Fukuoka Prefecture, just before Hakata, Satoru explained. Suji knew exactly where he meant, but couldn't understand why Satoru would want to go there, instead of to Hakata, which was much larger. I have some distant relatives there, Satoru explained. They took in our cat when we couldn't have him anymore. I haven't been to see him at all since then. I see, Suji thought. It's not Kokura he wants to visit, but a cat. Why couldn't you keep it? He asked disgustedly, but Satoru gave a troubled smile. He seemed unsure how to respond, and Sugi was just thinking that maybe he should change the subject when a shadow loomed over them. I heard, laughing her usual audacious laugh. It was Shikako. Man, you're always sticking your nose into things, aren't you? Suji teased her. Shut it, she shot back. I know exactly how you feel, wanting to visit your beloved cat. I'll pitch in and help. Do you know where I can get work? Satoru asked. And where you can begin? This very weekend? Shikako answered. Really? If there's a job that's good, then tell me about it too. Suji had been starting to think about finding a summer job himself. Having a part-time job during term time is prohibited, but there is an exception. This shall not apply to helping out with a family business. And if it's helping with a classmate's family business, if you apply, you can get permission to work at the weekends. They consider it part of social studies. In short, she was telling Satoru he could work in her family's orchard. The pay isn't much, but I'll ask them to pay you weekly, so if you start work now, you should be able to go on your trip at the beginning of August. Satoru stood up, so excited he nearly kicked over his chair. The crop was ready to harvest, and a lot of customers were coming to pick fruit in their orchard, so she joined them to work there on Sundays, except during exam time. The hourly wages were even less than working in a small supermarket. But by the time the school closing ceremony was over, Satoru had been able to put away about 20,000 yen. What are you going to use your money for, Sushan? Shikako asked. I haven't thought about it, which wasn't exactly true. Hey, do you want to go and see a film? He said, trying to make it sound as if he'd just come up with the idea. Your treat? As he expected, she leapt at the idea. Okay, I mean, you did get me the job and all. Great, maybe I'll sponge a meal off you as well. Only just managing, not to physically jump for joy. Smiling, Suji said. Okay. Great, you weren't joking, were you? Don't you dare change your mind later on. Shikako, totally thrilled that Suji would be footing the bill, certainly wasn't viewing this as a date. But for now, that was okay. There was no need to rush things. On the first day of the last week of July, Satoru failed to show up for work. It wasn't like him. He was always so conscientious, and he hadn't even been in touch to explain his absence. So you wonder what was up. Satoru turned up an hour late. I'm very sorry I'm late, he said, his face pale and stiff. If you don't feel well, you should take some time off, Shikako's father said, but Satoru insisted he was fine. At lunchtime, Shikako's parents told the three of them to come back to the house. Satoru was looking paler than ever. What's wrong? Has something happened? They asked. But again, he obstinately insisted it was nothing, and wouldn't say any more. Shikako, silently watching, spoke up. Has something happened to your old cat? Satoru's lips tightened. He dropped his head and screwed up his eyes. Finally, he allowed the tears to flow. He was hit by a car, he muttered, his voice broken, and then he couldn't say anything more. It seemed he'd just got the news that morning. You were really fond of that cat, weren't you? Shikako said, putting her arm around his shoulders, to which Satoru murmured back. He was family. Why had he been forced to give him away? When Suji had asked him earlier, he hadn't responded. If the cat had been regarded as part of the family, it was even more puzzling. If he was this grief-stricken at the news, he shouldn't have given the cat away in the first place, thought Soji, somewhat uncharitably. Perhaps he was a bit jealous of the other two unreserved love of cats. He was the cat we had back when my parents were still alive, said Satoru, which put Soji in his place. God was punishing him, he figured, for having entertained a nasty thought about his poor friend. And you hope to be in time to see him. Shikaku's kind words were so full of warmth. Why am I such a low, mean person, when all I want is to be the kind of man Shikako won't be ashamed of, thought Soji. He hadn't realized that Satoru's parents were dead, but even if I had known, I would never have been as sympathetic as Shikako. What are you going to do about the job? When you carry on? Asked Soji. Beside him, Shikaku gave him a "really? Now?" type of look. There's no point in going to Kokura now, Satoru said and gave a faint smile. Shikaku interrupted him. You really should go. Save up your money and go over there to say goodbye. Satoru blinked in surprise. You have to mourn your cat properly, or you won't get over it. Don't just sit here fretting about being too late. Go there and mourn him. Tell him you're sorry you didn't make it in time, that you wanted to see him. Suji knew very well how deeply these words resonated with Satoru, because even he, who thought those meant things, was starting to tear up. Satoru smiled and decided to get back to work.